The moment she flinched away from my kiss, I knew my relationship was already over. I just didn't know it yet. I'd come home after the worst day I'd had in months. We'd been working outside in -10 Celsius weather, trying to fix a burst water pipe downtown Toronto. My back was really hurting. My work gloves were soaked through, and my hands were so cold I could barely feel my fingers. The job site had been a nightmare. Frozen ground, broken equipment, and a supervisor who kept pushing us to work faster despite the dangerous conditions. All I wanted was a hot shower, maybe some soup, and to sit next to the woman I thought still loved me. Alyssa was on the couch wrapped in that expensive fleece blanket she'd bought last month, the one that cost more than I made in a day. Her laptop was open, but she wasn't working, just watching some Netflix drama, completely absorbed like I didn't exist. The apartment was warm and cozy, a stark contrast to the brutal cold I'd just endured for 10 hours straight. I noticed new things around the apartment, a bottle of expensive face cream on the coffee table that I'd never seen before, designer skincare products that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. When had she started buying this stuff? I leaned down to kiss her cheek. Something we'd done 1,000 times before, a simple gesture that used to make her smile. She flinched, actually pulled back like I'd tried to hit her. "You okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Yeah, just tired." "From work?" She turned her head slowly, like I'd asked the stupidest question in the world. Her eyes weren't tired. They weren't sad. They were full of disgust, like the smell of construction work on my clothes physically repulsed her. "No, Brandon, I'm tired of you." The silence that followed cut through the apartment like a knife. I stood there in my muddy work boots, still wearing my safety vest, staring at this woman I'd been living with for over a year. This woman I'd met during a snowstorm at a GO train stop, who used to light up when I walked through the door, who used to ask about my day and actually listen to the answer. I didn't say anything. Couldn't say anything. My throat felt like it was closing up. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and stared at my reflection while cold water ran over my numb hands. The man looking back at me had tired eyes, a 5 o'clock shadow, and calloused hands that told the story of honest work. But when had honest work become something to be ashamed of? When had I become a burden? When had coming home to my own apartment become an inconvenience for the person who was supposed to love me? I looked at myself more closely. My rough jawline, the little scar on my eyebrow from a hockey injury when I was 15, hands that were red and cracked from the cold. I thought about how Alyssa used to trace that scar with her finger, how she used to say my hands felt strong and safe. What had changed? That night, I lay on the edge of our bed, listening to her sleep. She was turned away from me, curled up like she was protecting herself from something. From me, apparently. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every conversation we'd had in the past few months, looking for clues I'd missed. I thought about that first night we met. January, bitter cold. One of those Toronto winters that makes you question why anyone lives here. I was working overtime on a construction site on King Street, doing winter maintenance on a half-finished condo project. I'd missed my GO train and she was waiting under the same covered stop, arms crossed, headphones in, tapping her boots against the frozen sidewalk like she was trying to escape the cold through rhythm. She looked up at me once, then back at her phone. I thought she was completely out of my league. The kind of woman who probably lived in one of those glass condos at City Place, worked at some tech office with an espresso machine in the lobby, and had a dog with a trendy name like Milo or Nova. I was just some guy in a neon safety parka, hands calloused from work, boots caked with mud and ice. But fate, or maybe just that ridiculous Canadian winter, gave me a break. The train never came. Her phone died. Mine still had battery. She asked if she could borrow it to check Uber, and when she typed in her name, it appeared on the screen. Alyssa Dub Boyce. We ended up talking while we waited. She was funny, sharp, made jokes about how Toronto transit fails exactly when you need it most. When I offered to split a ride to East York, she said yes. She lived near Pape Station. I was heading toward Scarborough. That ride turned into a date 2 weeks later, That date turned into a relationship 2 months after that, and by the next winter, we were moving into this one-bedroom condo rental near High Park. At the start, it was incredible. Really incredible. Alyssa was smart, incredibly sharp with people. She worked in HR for a tech company downtown and could read personalities like an open book. I found that attractive, the way she could figure people out so quickly. She said she liked how grounded I was, how I didn't try to impress anyone, how I listened more than I talked. Our routines synced perfectly. She worked 9 to 5 at her company's headquarters on Front Street. I worked construction from 7 to 3 around the GTA, sometimes Mississauga, sometimes North York, wherever the jobs were. We'd meet after work, make dinner together, and talk about our days. I thought we were on the same page. Thought she saw me for who I was, a good man, honest, hardworking, loyal. But slowly things started to shift. It began with little things that I told myself weren't important. She used to light up when I walked through the door. "Hey, babe," she'd say, rushing to kiss me and asking how my day was. But then one day I walked in, and all I got was, "Hey," without eye contact or a smile. At first, I told myself she was tired. Work had been hectic. Her company had gone through a merger, and she was spending more hours handling layoffs and conducting interviews. The stress was getting to her. But the warmth didn't come back, not even on weekends. She'd say things like, "I'm just drained," or "I need space to think." I gave her space. I tried not to take it personally, but there's only so many nights you can sit next to someone who used to hold your hand and now scrolls Instagram in complete silence. I started noticing patterns. She was tired every single day, no matter how early she got home from work. She didn't want to go for walks around High Park like we used to. When I brought up ideas for weekend getaways, maybe Niagara Falls or a camping trip near Algonquin, she'd say, "I just don't have the energy." Yet somehow she had plenty of energy to meet her coworkers for drinks at Bar Hop on Thursday nights. She'd come home after midnight, slightly drunk, and collapse into bed without saying a word to me. I didn't accuse her of anything. I'm not that kind of guy. I've seen men turn paranoid over nothing and ruin perfectly good relationships. But I started feeling something I'd never felt with her before, like I wasn't enough, not exciting enough, not interesting enough, not successful enough. So I started trying harder. I cooked more meals, elaborate dinners that took hours to prepare. I cleaned the entire apartment when she was at work, scrubbing every surface until it sparkled. I bought her little things, those chocolate-covered almonds she used to love, expensive coffee from that place on Queen Street, flowers from the shop near the subway station. I even surprised her with a reservation at her favorite vegan bistro on Ossington. She said thanks but barely touched her food, spending most of the dinner checking her phone and giving one-word answers to my questions. The breaking point came on a night in February. I'd had a brutal day at work. We'd been outside in -10-degree weather, working on a cracked water pipe downtown. My back was killing me from hunching over frozen equipment. My gloves had gotten soaked through, and I'd spent most of the day with numb fingers trying to handle tools and fittings. When I got home, all I wanted was a hot shower, maybe some soup, and a little conversation with the woman I thought still loved me. She was lying on the couch wrapped in that fleece blanket, laptop open, but not actually working, just watching some Netflix drama about rich people having problems. I could smell something expensive in the air, new perfume maybe, or that skincare stuff that had been appearing around the apartment. Oh, I kissed her cheek, the same gentle gesture I'd done hundreds of times before. She flinched away from me like I was diseased. "You okay?" I asked, genuinely worried something was wrong. "Yeah, just tired." "From work?" She turned her head slowly, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not tiredness, not sadness. Pure disgust. "No, Brandon, I'm tired of you." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there in my work clothes, muddy boots, safety vest still on, probably smelling like concrete and cold metal, staring at this woman I'd built my life around. I didn't say anything because I couldn't. My throat had closed up completely. I walked to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and stared at myself in the mirror while cold water ran over my hands. When had I become a burden? When had coming home to my own apartment become an inconvenience for the person who was supposed to love me? I looked at my reflection and saw a stranger. Not because I'd changed, but because I was finally seeing myself through her eyes. A blue-collar guy with rough hands and simple ambitions. Someone she'd outgrown. That night, I lay on the very edge of our bed, listening to her sleep. She was curled up facing away from me, like she was protecting herself from contamination. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every conversation, every interaction, looking for signs I'd missed. Where had all the warmth gone? When had I stopped being the man she wanted to come home to? The next morning, I got up at 5 a.m. Earlier than usual. The apartment was still dark, snow dusting the windows. I made oatmeal and coffee in complete silence, moving around the kitchen like a ghost. When Alyssa emerged from the bedroom in her robe, hair messy and eyes half closed, she looked right through me, went to the fridge, grabbed her oat milk, poured coffee into her travel mug like I wasn't even there. For the first time in our entire relationship, I didn't offer to make her breakfast, didn't ask about her day, or remind her to grab her gloves or check if she had everything for work. I just picked up my car keys, zipped my jacket, and left. That's how my quiet withdrawal began. Over the following weeks, I systematically stopped doing all the little things that had defined our relationship. No more, "How's your day going?" texts at noon. No more rushing home after my shift ended, eager to see her and hear about her day. Instead, I started taking detours. I'd jog around High Park for an hour, breathing in the cold air and trying to clear my head. I'd grab dinner at that shawarma place on Bloor that I hadn't been to since we moved in together, sitting alone at a small table and actually enjoying the silence. At home, I slept facing the wall, stopped trying to kiss her goodnight, removed myself from conversations that weren't really conversations anyway, just her making demands disguised as requests. When she did speak to me, it was purely transactional. "Did you pay the hydro bill? Can you take the trash out? Don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning from that place on Roncesvalles." She never asked how I was doing, never noticed that I'd stopped drinking coffee in the mornings because it reminded me of our old routine, never realized that I was documenting every shared expense in a detailed password-protected spreadsheet on my laptop. I started paying attention to things I'd been blind to before. The expensive skincare products that kept appearing in our bathroom, designer clothes hanging in the closet that I'd never seen her wear around me, restaurant receipts in her purse for places we'd never been to together. 3 weeks after the flinch, her sister Michelle invited us for dinner in Oakville. We hadn't been anywhere together in over a month, but Alyssa insisted we go. The drive was silent. Dinner was awkward. I watched Alyssa come alive talking about her work, leadership development, possible Vancouver branch, how she was on their radar. When was the last time she'd looked at me with that enthusiasm? "You two planning any trips this year?" Michelle asked. Before I could answer, Alyssa snorted. "Brandon doesn't plan. He's a routine." Sharp edges underneath that chuckle. Michelle gave me a sympathetic look. I stepped outside. Standing in the snowy driveway, I realized she didn't see me as a man anymore. I was furniture, background noise, a set of responsibilities keeping her life stable while she looked for something better. Driving back in silence, I made my decision. I was leaving, not with drama, with surgical precision. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Instead of going to the job site, I drove to a Scotia Bank branch in downtown Toronto and opened a new checking account. Just me, no joint access, no shared responsibilities. I started slowly moving money into it. Not enough to raise suspicion, just a few $100s every week from my paychecks. Money that had been going toward shared expenses that she barely contributed to anyway. Then I called my cousin Jacob in Oshawa. He owned a duplex that he'd inherited from our grandmother, and I knew he had a basement apartment that had just become available. "It's not much," he warned me over the phone. "One bedroom, low ceilings, carpet that's seen better days. But it's got a separate entrance, and it's cheap." How cheap? 800 a month, utilities included. You interested? I thought about our current rent, 2,400 for a one-bedroom near High Park that I was paying 1,800 of, while Alyssa covered 600 because she was still paying off student loans. Can I see it this weekend? Sure, man. Everything okay? You sound different. Getting there, I told him. That Saturday, while Alyssa was at some work event downtown, another leadership development workshop that would probably keep her out until late, I drove to Oshawa to look at the apartment. It was exactly what Jacob had described. Small, dim, with wood paneling from the 70s and carpet that had seen decades of tenants. But it had something our current place didn't have, the promise of peace. Standing in that empty apartment, I could imagine mornings without walking on eggshells, evenings without wondering what mood she'd be in, nights without lying on the edge of the bed, feeling unwanted in my own home. I'll take it, I told Jacob. Don't you want to think about it? Talk to Alyssa? No, I said. This is my decision. Over the next 2 weeks, I planned my exit systematically. I documented our shared expenses, backed up important papers, and quietly collected my personal belongings. My dad's watch, inherited tools, family photos. I labeled boxes as electrical supplies, so Alyssa wouldn't get suspicious. She didn't notice anyway. She was too busy with her new habits, dressing better for work, staying out later, constantly texting someone she'd turn her phone away from when I entered the room. I stopped caring who it was. The woman I'd fallen in love with was already gone. One evening, I decided to conduct an experiment. I cooked pasta the way she used to love it. Sautéed garlic, fresh tomatoes from the expensive grocery store, parsley from the plant we'd grown on our balcony, freshly grated Parmesan that cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a week. It was one of her old favorites, something that used to make her smile and wrap her arms around me from behind while I cooked. She walked into the kitchen and froze when she saw me at the stove. You're cooking? Yeah. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. That's rare these days. I kept stirring the pot, didn't look at her directly. I felt like making something nice. You're acting different, she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. Not concern, exactly. Maybe suspicion. I finally looked up, meeting her eyes directly. I'm getting used to things. Like what? Being done. She stared at me for several long seconds, like she was trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. But I knew the shift had started. She could feel the change in me, the withdrawal of the attention and energy I'd been pouring into our relationship for months. The next morning, I left a printed document on the kitchen table. Not some dramatic goodbye letter or emotional plea. Just facts, laid out in clear, simple language. Financial summary. Brandon and Alyssa, April 2022 to present. Rent, split 75-25. Brandon $1,800, Alyssa $600 per month. Utilities, 100%. Brandon, 150 to 200 per month. Internet, 100%. Brandon, 80 per month. Groceries, approximately 80% Brandon, 400 to 500 per month. Car insurance, 100% Brandon, 180 per month. Streaming services, 100% Brandon, $45 per month. Lease expires May 31st, 2023. Brandon's notice of departure, April 15th, 2023. Items in second bedroom. Brandon's personal property, to be collected April 20 to 22. At the bottom, I'd written one sentence by hand. You were right, Alyssa. You're tired of me, so I'm giving you what you wanted. Space. She didn't text me that day, didn't speak to me for 3 whole days. Then, suddenly, she started acting sweet, like someone had flipped a switch and she remembered how to be the woman I'd fallen in love with. Hey, I picked up some sparkling cider, she'd say when I got home from work. Want to watch something together tonight? We should go to St. Lawrence Market this weekend. Remember how we used to do that? Get fresh bread and cheese and just wander around? I was thinking maybe we could plan that camping trip you mentioned. Algonquin Park might be nice in the spring. But it was too late. When I looked at her now, all I saw was someone who thought she had me figured out. Someone who believed she could treat me like garbage for months and then flip a switch when it became convenient. Someone who thought I'd never actually leave because I'd always been there before. During those final weeks, while she was making her last-ditch effort to keep me around, I was finalizing the practical details of my departure. I'd bought a used Dodge Ram pickup truck with cash from my new bank account. It was 10 years old with high mileage, but it ran well and had enough space for everything that mattered to me. I spent hours loading my tools, clothes, and personal belongings into boxes and bags. Everything I owned fit into the truck bed and back seat. Clean, organized, no mess left behind. Looking at those boxes, I realized how little I'd actually accumulated during our time together. Most of the furniture was hers. Most of the decorative items, the kitchen gadgets, the expensive sheets and towels, all hers. I'd been living in her world, contributing money and labor while she made all the decisions about how we lived. On a Sunday morning in late March, while Alyssa was still sleeping, I made my final preparations. I left my copy of the apartment keys on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker she'd programmed to start automatically every morning. Next to the keys was a sealed envelope containing everything she'd need to understand my departure. A complete list of every shared expense since we'd moved in together, showing exactly how much I'd contributed versus how much she had. My lawyer's business card. Yes, I'd consulted with someone to make sure I was protecting myself legally. And a written statement confirming that I was vacating the apartment voluntarily with no intention of contesting any shared assets. At the very bottom, I'd written one final line by hand. You were tired of me, so I gave you the rest you wanted. Then I picked up the last of my boxes, walked out the door, and didn't look back. I drove straight to Oshawa, unloaded my truck in Jacob's driveway, and spent the day setting up my new apartment. It was smaller, quieter, and infinitely more peaceful than anywhere I'd lived in months. That evening I did something I hadn't done since we'd first started dating. I posted a photo on Instagram. It was me standing in front of Jacob's duplex, holding a coffee mug, actually smiling for the first time in weeks. The caption was simple. Peace is expensive, but worth every cent. I didn't block Alyssa's number. That's what surprised her most. She called at noon on Monday. I let it go to voicemail. She texted an hour later. Where are you? Is this some kind of joke? I left her on read. By Tuesday evening, the practical consequences of my departure started hitting her. The hydro bill was in my name. I called Toronto Hydro and had the service disconnected, effective immediately. The internet was my account with Rogers. I canceled it with a phone call. The Netflix, Spotify, and Disney Plus subscriptions she'd gotten used to, all gone. Even the car she'd been driving, a gray 2019 Toyota Corolla that was registered in my name, was no longer available to her. She'd taken it to some friend's dinner party in Liberty Village on Friday night. On Sunday morning, I had a towing company bring it to my new address and immediately called the insurance company to remove her as a driver. By Monday morning, she was dealing with cracks in every corner of her comfortable little world. The voicemails started on Tuesday. Brandon, we need to talk. This isn't how adults handle relationship problems. You're being incredibly immature. I never thought you'd actually leave like this. But she wasn't panicked because she missed me or realized she'd made a mistake. She was panicked because she'd lost control, because the reliable, predictable Brandon had done something completely unexpected. I didn't respond until Friday evening, after she'd sent a long text message about how maybe things had gotten tense between us, and perhaps we'd both made some mistakes, and we should sit down and talk things through like grown-ups. I replied with one sentence. You said I was just a routine, so I stopped showing up. 3 days of silence after that. Then the guilt text started coming. I didn't mean to hurt you. You completely blindsided me with this. You didn't even give me a chance to fix things. You should have warned me you were this unhappy. But that was the irony that she couldn't see. I had warned her, Every dinner where she ignored me while scrolling through her phone. Every night when she turned her back to me in bed. Every casual insult disguised as a joke. Every sigh of exasperation when I tried to start a conversation. Every time she made me feel like I was bothering her by existing in my own home. That was the warning. She just never believed I'd actually walk away because she thought she had me completely figured out. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life from scratch. Jacob's basement apartment became home. I turned the spare room into a workshop and started picking up side jobs, electrical installations, security systems, renovation work. One client was a divorced woman named Claire who ran a florist shop. After installing her lighting, we grabbed coffee, and I found myself genuinely laughing for the first time in months. I also signed up for a business management course. If I was going to grow my side business, I wanted to do it right. Every few days, Alyssa would send another text, sometimes blaming me for being selfish and immature, sometimes pleading with me to be reasonable and come back so we could work things out, sometimes just sending photos of things in the apartment, like she was trying to remind me of what I was giving up. She was unraveling, and I wasn't even paying close attention anymore. A mutual friend, Steve, a guy I'd known since high school, called me one afternoon while I was rewiring an outlet in someone's kitchen. "Dude, Alyssa showed up at my place last night," he said. "She was crying, talking about how you just disappeared and how she didn't realize how much you were holding everything together. She wants to meet up, talk things through." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd ask you. But honestly, man, she seemed pretty messed up. Are you sure you don't want to at least hear her out?" There's nothing left to say, Steve. She ended our relationship before I walked out the door. I just made it official. "But maybe." "She told me she was tired of me," I interrupted. "Not that she was stressed, not that work was hard, not that we needed to communicate better. She was tired of me, as a person. What exactly am I supposed to do with that?" Steve was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, when you put it that way. I spent months trying to figure out what I was doing wrong," I continued. "Cooking her favorite meals, keeping the apartment spotless, buying her little gifts, giving her space when she asked for it. Nothing worked because the problem wasn't what I was doing. The problem was who I am, and I can't change that, and I don't want to, but I knew what was really eating at her. It wasn't that she missed me or suddenly realized she'd made a mistake. It was that she'd underestimated me completely. She thought she'd broken me down so thoroughly that I'd just accept whatever treatment she dished out. Be passive, be convenient, be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she threw my way. Instead, I'd become someone she didn't expect, a man who'd outgrown her need for control. A month later, I was meeting a potential new client at a coffee shop in downtown Toronto when Alyssa walked in. She was wearing sunglasses despite being indoors, dressed in clothes I'd never seen before, expensive-looking business attire that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. She carried herself with that artificial confidence I'd seen her use at networking events, like she was performing the role of a successful professional woman. She saw me immediately and stopped dead in her tracks. I smiled politely and went back to reviewing the electrical plans my potential client had brought. After a moment, she walked over to my table. "Brandon," she said, clearing her throat, "you look different." I did look different. I'd lost about 15 pounds since moving out, partly from eating less takeout and partly from all the physical work I'd been doing. I'd also started dressing better for client meetings. Not expensive clothes, but clean, professional, put together. "I feel different," I replied honestly. She hesitated, like she was trying to find the right approach. "I didn't expect you to go so cold on me." "You said you were tired of me," I replied calmly. "I gave you rest." She tried to laugh it off, but it came out forced and awkward. "You're really not going to talk to me, after everything we had together?" "We're talking now." The sharp, dismissive edge she used to have in her voice was completely gone. She sounded almost desperate. "I didn't mean it the way it came out," she finally said. "I was under so much stress at work. The merger was crazy. I was working 12-hour days. I was confused about what I wanted. I said something hurtful in a moment of frustration." I nodded. "Maybe, but I was clear about what I needed." "What do you mean?" I needed to feel wanted in my own home. I needed a partner, not a roommate who resented my presence. I needed someone who saw me as more than just a convenient way to split the bills. She blinked, and for a moment, I could see the woman I'd originally fallen in love with. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. "I do see you as more than that," she said quietly. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and looked at her directly. "You made me feel small in my own home," I said. "So I built a new one where I'm respected. That's all I ever wanted." Then I walked out, leaving her standing there in her expensive clothes and designer sunglasses, finally understanding that some bridges can't be rebuilt once they've been burned. Since then, she's tried messaging me a few more times. Birthday wishes, texts asking how I'm doing, photos of places we used to go together, with captions like, "Remember this?" or "Thinking of you." I don't reply anymore. Not out of anger or spite, but because I'm done giving emotional energy to someone who treated my heart like a punching bag for months. I don't hate Alyssa, but I'll never forget what it felt like to sit next to someone who looked me directly in the eyes and told me she was tired of me, who made me feel like caring about her was a burden I was placing on her shoulders. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see a man. Not a routine, not a reliable backup plan, not some convenient placeholder while she figured out what she really wanted. Just a man who took the pain of rejection and turned it into the foundation for personal growth. 6 months later, Claire and I went on our first real date. We talked, we laughed, and for the first time in years, someone was genuinely excited to see me. "Saw your Instagram post. She looks nice. I hope you're happy." For the first time in months, I actually read one of her messages all the way through. Then I deleted it without responding. Because I'd finally learned something important. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I should have walked away after the flinch, should have recognized that moment for what it was, not a bad day or a rough patch, but a revelation of how she truly saw me. But sometimes you need to learn that love shouldn't feel like a job you're failing at. That loyalty shouldn't keep you tied to someone who doesn't value you. These days, I wake up in my own place and start each day knowing that everyone in my life actually wants me around. My clients respect my work. Claire enjoys my company. It's a simple life, but it's mine. And for the first time in years, that feels like enough.